Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar Return to School, Support and Strategies for Managing Behaviour and Worry. Welcome, this is a contact webinar. If there's any technical hitches, please do bear with us. And if it's okay, that wasn't the slide I was expecting. We'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar and I hope that that's okay. So, if it's okay, we'll introduce ourselves.
Hiya, I'm Dionne Hollis. I'm an occupational therapist and I work for Cumbria Northumberland Tyne-and-Wear NHS Foundation Trust. And I've worked with children, young people with learning disability and or autism for a number of years now. And I'll pass you over to Steph.
My name's Stephanie Carr and I'm a speech and language therapist. I absolutely adore my job. I work for an agency called Tees Esconway Valleys Community Foundation Trust, and I work just like Dionne with young people with learning disabilities and or autism, usually who have some behavioural needs. And I am so excited to join you today to talk to you about going back to school. So
I think what I would like to say first is just well done. It's really tough right now. Being at home with family members for long periods of time is hard for anyone, and put children in the mix, and it is very difficult. I'm a mum myself, so I know how difficult it has been through lockdown. And you know, when we have behaviour that challenges, and that can make things slightly tougher. So really, it is right now. We're all experiencing a situation that we've never ever experienced before. I've certainly never experienced a situation like this before, and it has been tough. And I think, you know, the biggest key for me is that we all need to take time to look after ourselves, and I think it's really important to remember that when we're going through this time, to think that we're doing exactly the best that we can do. And I think, you know, this little picture sums it up. I think most of the time we're doing better than we think we're doing. And just really to say that, you know, a lot is being asked of parents at the moment, whether that's homeschooling, having our children 24/7, you know, without. I'm really sorry, I'm just getting a call through and I just need to close that, sorry. You know, having our children at home, having to homeschool, having reduced contact with families, it's made life really, really tough. But we also need to think that we're doing our very best that we can do.
absolutely. And so we're going to have a little bit of a think about some concepts to start with, and then we're going to move into talking about some strategies. But the first concept that I want to talk to you about today is about sharing information without sharing worry. And I suppose I think back to the start of all this, kind of, can you remember just before the schools closed? I can remember being in a school on the Monday and the head teacher saying to me, I just wish someone would make a decision. There are so many things going on, will someone just make a decision for us? And there was so much information, and there was so much of it was changing daily, and so many new words as well, like isolation, social distancing, is it coronavirus or COVID-19? Like our new words like social, like having a social bubble, and so many things were completely conflicting. You know, were we wearing face masks? Were we not wearing face masks? Are we wearing face masks now? Actually, I know tomorrow at work, I'll be wearing a face mask whenever I'm in a room with another person, whether that's a colleague or a patient. And so there's something about, there's so much information out there that a lot of the time we're not just sharing information, we're sharing worry, or we're sharing, definitely sharing feelings about that. So I'd like to make some suggestions if it's okay. I'd suggest that if you feel like your little one is gathering information, find out where, if anywhere, they're getting that information from. I was talking to one of my young people last week, and one of the young people I work with, sorry, and he was saying that he only gets information from the BBC, from Sky News, and from the ITV News, and Reddit and this, and that's kind of thing, oh, you're getting so much information. And he was sharing a lot of worries about all this information he's getting. So what we thought about together is actually we were going to streamline the amount of information that he was seeking and getting then. And so we agreed that actually you'd only look at the BBC website, and if he had any more information, he'd go and talk to kind of a parent or kind of somebody like me to get some more information about that, or get the or to answer those questions. I'd also suggest that you choose consistent words, sentences and themes. I know that a lot of the young people that I work with and at home we're having lots and lots of repetitive questions, so questions that kind of are getting asked again and again and again. And it can be really useful if we have consistent responses to those. So I've got one of my young people that's asking when lockdown will finish, and that's almost an impossible question at the moment. But actually, what myself and his mum have done is we've worked together to have a consistent statement that everybody knows that they will respond to him when he asks that question. But little things like the difference between COVID-19 or coronavirus, they're the same things. As adults, we know that. But it can be important to pick one, because if not, there can be some different ideas about what that young person thinks or feels about that. So find out where we're getting information from, choose consistent words, sentences and themes, and you might want to think about schedule and time to share anxieties or worries. If your young person is somebody that communicates verbally, or with their behaviour, then actually designate a time in the day where let's hold on to that worry and let's think about that there, or let's hold on to that thought and feeling, and let's think about there in our special time. Planning something relaxing that we can do while we talk about it. So something that, you know, maybe like drawing, or using modelling clay so that our hands are busy, so to let us really communicate those things. Some young people with autism and related needs might benefit from setting arbitrary dates for review of the changes. Very much like our government do us. We'll review this in 3 weeks, we'll think about this in the future, because that can be often more containing than having no information when things might change. And so I know one of my young people, the date for when they're hoping to get back to music venues, their mum set a date in November with the hope that actually things won't be before then. And it's not it's a point for an opportunity for review rather than anything else. I think it's really important at the moment, and Dionne will talk about this a little later too, to focus on the things that have stayed the same as well as things that have changed too. Because it can be really easy to focus on all the things that have shut, or all the queues that have happening, or all of the adjustments to timetables. But it can be just as useful to think about, actually, we're still in the house, we've still got lovely things to do, we still have Sunday lunch on a Sunday, we're always going to have that roast chicken. And to focus on the things that we can control, rather than focus on the things that we can't control. A little further on, I'm going to talk about information resources, and when the end of the presentation, there's a lot of resources that will be supporting you to have conversations about the current changes and about returning to school too. But I'd suggest that it's always useful to keep a pen, a piece of paper, some colours, to write things down, or use resources to explain what you want to think about together, because it can act as a really good basis for starting that conversation. So that's a little bit about sharing information without sharing worry, and that feels like a whole big hours webinar by itself, but those are some thoughts. And I don't know about yourselves, but it's really easy to be carrying a lot of worry at the moment, or a lot of stress, or a lot of anxiety, or a lot of anger. And I sometimes like to think about that as a little bit of an overflowing bucket. Because sometimes I get out of bed in the morning and I feel like I could take over the world, but sometimes I get out of bed and I feel like I want to crawl back under it. And that's often about my capacity to cope with the things that are going on. And I don't know whether you can see the presentation, I hope you can, but you'll see that I've got a little diagram there of a bucket. And there are normally loads of things that fill our buckets. Lack of sleep, being out of routine, being bored or under or overstimulated. And a lot of our buckets at the moment are filled with coronavirus. You're kind of, oh, COVID-19, choose one, stick to that term. Because we've got health anxiety going on, we've got financial anxiety going on, and that can feel really confusing for an adult, but it can be equally, if not more, confusing for our young people. And so the things that are normally, the things that are filling their buckets are amplified or exacerbated because they've also got their worries about coronavirus. They've also got their thoughts and concerns about the things that are going on too. And the things that are ordinarily available to them to empty their buckets, maybe like sticking to a routine, talking to friends, and spending some time in the sensory room at school, maybe your therapeutic sessions, going to your favourite places, all those things that naturally act to empty our buckets and maybe not as available as they are previously, or were previously, sorry, or are not available at all. So what I like to do is I like to think about the bucket model, which is not very fancy, to think about what's filling our young people's buckets, what we can take out, and how we can work to think about how we can empty them. So it might be that you think about what's filling your little one's bucket at the moment, and that might be lack of routine. That might be worry about going back to school. That might be being understimulated because they can't access their sensory diet. That might be being worried that they haven't seen grandma and granddad for a long time because they're shielding. And then using that concept of how do we take things out of the bucket by thinking, do we need to write a social story? Do we need to think about how we can get in touch with our occupational therapist to see what adjustments we can get to get in the sensory diary at the home? What new routines can we create? Can we use some video, which is Dionne's going to talk about a little bit later, to think about how we prepare for going back to school? So it's that concept of thinking, as our buckets fill up, we need to equally think about how we empty them, because once a bucket becomes overflowing, then we're dealing with behaviour or we're dealing with somebody being in crisis, rather than think how we're constantly proactively emptying that bucket. I hope that makes sense.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about adjusting expectations, and I know that can be quite scary to think about adjusting our expectations. I think it's really important to consider at times of change and increased anxiety, reducing demands and expectations can be really helpful. And as Steph has just been saying, our young people are experiencing some very different situations, and their buckets are becoming full of things that probably they weren't full of before. The worry and the anxiety that they might be feeling will be having an impact. So I think when we talk about adjusting our expectations, we often have the thought of, but if I stop doing that once, that's going to continue to be the case. And I think it's just really important to think about that. Behaviour emerges over time, and by not doing something on one occasion, or by changing the way you do something on one occasion, won't result in that becoming a behaviour. So really the key things for me are about reducing demands. I think at the moment we've all got lots of demands placed on us. There's, demand of doing homeschool work, of I don't know about if anybody uses social media, but you've got people, baking beautiful cakes, making wonderful rainbows, and I think there's a lot of demand placed on ourselves and our young people. So think about just reducing those demands, not only on our young people, but on ourselves, and thinking about, I'm doing the best that I can right now. I think factors to think about, or, you know, if an activity doesn't get completed, if it's a self-care activity such as brushing our hair or washing our face or brushing our teeth, does it have to be done right now? Is this something we can revisit later on? Can we refocus and think about this at a later date and time? Yes, generally we would get up and we'd get washed and we'd brush our teeth before breakfast, but actually there's lots of people who are having PJ days at the moment. And does it really matter, me included, you know, does it really matter if teeth aren't brushed till 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon? So thinking about maybe just thinking, it hasn't happened right now, but it might happen later. Starting to think as well for me about the environment. Our young people are in different environments, and thinking about what might be different in their home environment now prior to coronavirus. Is there more people in the home? You know, lots of husbands, mums, dads, brothers, sisters aren't at school. They're not visiting, having their normal activities. So is the house noisier? You know, there's more people around, or people gardening. I know one of the things I was worried about doing this webinar today is, what if my next door neighbour decides to cut their lawn and all you can hear is a lawnmower? So thinking about, you know, there's that increased noise. So thinking about the environment and what might happen in your environment, because you might need to adjust your expectations, because actually it's been really nice hot weather and everybody's been out doing their gardening and doing their DIY, and there's some drilling going on next door. So thinking about, you know, the environment and what you might do in your environment to reduce those demands. Thinking about actually what it is that you can give your young person to control. Because at the moment, I don't know about you, but I feel like there's lots of things in my life that I have absolutely no control over. So very similar to Steph, from tomorrow I'll be expected to wear a face covering or a face mask in the office. Actually, I have no control over that, but I know it's going to be hot. I know it's going to be stuffy. I know I'm going to struggle, that I won't be able to see my colleagues' mouths and face and be able to read their expressions, and that actually not having that control over that increases my anxiety a little bit. And I think for our young people, they've had lots of control taken from them. So thinking about what it is our young people can control, giving them some of that control and giving them some choice. And that might be that you revisit and focus on an activity later on at a later time of day, because you're going to give that young person a little bit more choice. And maybe let them start to think about letting our young people decide their own routine. So we know that routines are really important, but it might be that our routine needs to be altered at this period of time, and we might want to consider about giving our young people some control around altering that routine, and, you know, supporting it with all the visuals that Steph might talk about. So that's one strategy that sometimes is helpful, is trying to negotiate and bargain a routine. And I think, you know, for me, praise, think about how our young people are feeling, and how they might be feeling anxious, scared, confused, because I know for the first few weeks, and even now, I still sometimes feel a little bit confused as I walk into Tesco and realise that I'm waiting in this awful long queues, or that there's people queuing to get into Primark today. I feel really confused about lots of things, and lots of the government messages have been very confusing. So think about how our young people might be feeling, and, you know, remember to praise them, that they're doing well, because actually they're living through something that I suppose we never imagined they would, and they're doing pretty good. So remembering to give them that praise, that actually, you know, we've managed to get through this, or we've gotten through this day really. And yes, we might still be in our pajamas, but we've smiled, we've laughed, we've painted a picture, we've had a cuddle. You know, praise the things that you've done that have been really lovely together, because I think within every day there will be things that you'll be doing that'll be just so that you'll want to give some praise for. You might want to be setting some reminders around rules and routines, but you might also want to revisit those rules and routines and give some choice around them. I think one of the key things for me is planning preferred activities, thinking about the activities that we know our young people really, really enjoy, and pairing them with the things that have been a little bit more tricky through this period. And again, thinking about, if we're thinking about our routines, thinking about the activities that you might need to introduce in at this period of time, but thinking about what you can keep the same and doing that with your young person. But I think, you know, not to worry too much about adjusting expectations. So if only half the schoolwork gets done, well, actually that's great. I personally think anything that you're doing through this time, if you're keeping yourself safe and well and happy, then actually that's what we need to be focusing on. Because I think there's been a lot of pressure put on. I think a lot of expectations that we were all going to be up at 9:30 and doing Joe Wicks, and I'm not up doing Joe Wicks. So, you know, so just adjusting those expectations for our young people. Then I'm going to think about, and I think Steph touched on that, and I've touched a little bit, but some things are very much the same, but some things are very, very different. So I know for tomorrow, actually my office environment is going to be the same. I'm going to be sat in the office with the same person doing the same job, but it's going to be hugely different. And the fact that we're all going to be wearing face masks, and I don't know about your young people, whether they've been out to the shops or not, but I know certainly for me, when I go outside, things are very much the same, but very, very much different. And when we're thinking about our young people and thinking about how we might want to transition them back into the school environment, we might want to be thinking about what are the 5 things that are going to be the same at school. Will they have the same school teacher? Will they sit next to the same person? Will the order of their lessons go in the same way? But thinking about what might be different, actually they might have to eat lunch in the classroom. I think that's a major difference. They will have to, a lot of the grounds will be marked out with the 2-metre social distancing. They may have to queue to get into school, which might be quite different. They may start school at a different time. They may have to wash their hands before they walk through the school door. So thinking about who at school is going to be the same and who might be different, because actually as young people are going into bubbles, we might find that the teaching staff change slightly. So thinking about who might stay the same, but actually you might also have somebody else who's a little different. What type of things will be the same? So actually you're going to sit in the same classroom, you're going to be next to the same friend, but you're going to be 2 meters apart. You might have the same view from your desk. Thinking about what might stay the same, what might different. Where? I think that's a big one for me. I think it's really unclear about young people going to school, but certainly last week in the press there was lots of information about children going back to school in September, and lots of information that actually we might be looking at totally different buildings. That some young people might not actually return to a classroom as in a typical classroom that we know, but they may return into a village hall or a church hall. Or so thinking about where could be different, and if that where is different, what's going to be the same about that. So actually at that point, yes, it's in the church hall, but it will be set up like a classroom, and you will have a table and you will have a chair and you will have a pencil. So thinking about even if that where is very different, what's going to be the same. So you'll have your same teacher, you'll be with the same children. How long? Because we know the duration of school days has changed and may possibly change. So is this going to be a full school day, or will you just be there for the morning? If you are there just for the morning, what might be the same about that morning? How's break time going to be? I know for lots of young people, actually, the thing they love more than anything about school is break times. And for other young people, they're really tricky and they don't like that break time. But thinking about, actually, when will break times be? How long will break times be? If I don't normally go out on break time, where am I going to go? Is there still another place for me to go? and to think about what they're actually going to be doing at school. Certainly know that my children are at school in a key worker group, but it's nothing like school, and they're not doing a lot of work, and thinking about actually what it is they will be doing when they're there and having that quite firm. So it seems like a lot of work for parents, and I think this is a lot of work for parents to be thinking about all of this, but I think having that thought and that think about what's going to be the same and what's going to be different is going to be really key regarding a successful transition back to school.
Absolutely, and as part of that, we often think about visual structure and accessible information. Now, I had a really big think when I was writing this slide, because I was thinking about all the pressure that's on parents and on young people and on teaching staff at the moment. I think, you know, the teachers are worried about returning to school as well, aren't they? And listening to kind of what Dionne was saying about routine and what I said about routine is, it feels like our visual structure is so important right now, because I know at the start of lockdown, it felt like I wanted to throw out all of our visual timetables, that, you know, kind of nothing was the same, that kind of, you know, bedtime wasn't the same, getting up wasn't the same. And it felt like I just wanted to throw it all out of the window and really throw that baby out with the bathwater, which is a horrible analogy. But now I think we need them more than ever. And I think for some of our young people who managed to navigate life without them before, they might well need them now. And I know that kind of, even as an adult, I'm spending a lot of time looking at my work diary at the moment and spending a lot of time looking at my phone calendar to think, actually, what have I got coming up? When will I be doing that? And what will I be doing when I do that? Those questions that Dionne was going through about the who and the what and the where and the what doing, those are things that I'm asking myself. So I think it's a really important time to get our visual structure up and running. We don't need to feel guilty or worried that we haven't had in the past. And I don't think we need to kind of pressure ourselves that it's going to look really fancy, because I think sometimes you see, you and John was talking about those lovely cakes that everyone's baking. As a speech therapist, I often see lovely timetables that other speech therapists have made, and I get really jealous. But actually, you can make brilliant timetables by just doing some drawings, by just writing some words down. And if your little one uses objects of reference, just starting to reintroduce those objects of reference that indicate school can go some way into preparing them that there's going to be a change in routine. So, whether your little one uses object of reference, symbols, photographs, the written word, now is the time to start and introduce those bits of visual structure that we can, even if that's the week before, the night before, the morning of. Spend some time going through our new routines, all those new routines that you've created together, to think about building an expectation about what this now looks like. Because that's one of the ways that we can really start and manage worry. And as I say, it might feel a little bit late. It might be our little one's first day back at school already, or it might be that they've been going part-time and now they're going full-time. But it's never, ever, ever too late to start and think about getting that visual structure out, thinking about accessible information, thinking about what somebody needs to know. At the end of the PowerPoint, I think I've already said this, so forgive me if I'm being repetitive. I've got lots and lots of resources that I've got information on things like social distancing, washing your hands when you get to school, what might be different in school. So check them out, because there might be just that bit of hint or tip that you need to start and have that conversation about what school is going to be like. But I can't emphasise enough how important it is to start that conversation and support it visually where you can. And if your little one's got different accessibility needs, then it's about using whatever they can access to do that. As I say, for some young people, that's going to be about getting their school bag out, or getting their school uniform out, starting those routines that you had before, using visual cues or using sight, smell, sound cues to get those going. And I'm just going to take a moment, if it's okay, to talk about social stories. I say if it's okay, but I can't hear you, so you might all be shouting, no! But I wouldn't know.
Going to talk about them in any way.
Exactly. So I think social stories are great, but they're a little bit different from visual information, and they're a little bit different for accessible information too, because they're about something very personal. And I love to talk about social stories, and I do a full day educational social stories, but today I've got 3 minutes, so that's not really going to cut it. So what do I want to say? Social stories are used to share specific information that your child needs to know to make a difference to how they feel, so what they do or how they behave. So it's understanding from their point of view, what do they need to know to be successful or to make a difference. So the example I always talk about is me having snack accidents. There's a lot of information to share with you, and we don't know each other very well yet. But if you tell me how many calories is in a biscuit, so if you tell me there's 400 calories in a biscuit, it's going to be a good biscuit, isn't it? Anyway, if you tell me that there's 400 calories in a biscuit versus 50 calories in a rice cake, you're giving me information that helps me make a different choice. You're not saying, Stephanie, you shouldn't eat biscuits because none of your clothes from post-COVID fit anymore. You're helping me make a different choice. And that's how social stories work. So the personalisation of information to allow a young person to make a different choice or allow them to consider something different. So this might be, for example, when we're going back to school, when I go to school, these are the things that I can expect to see differently. This might make me feel X or Y. If I feel worry, I can tell a teacher. So it's almost planning for, if your young person normally worries and they maybe use their behaviour to demonstrate that, or they might try and escape from a situation, it's about predicting that there might be some worry and giving that young person a very specific strategy to handle that differently. Social stories are absolutely great for lots of young people, and they can be very simple as well. I've popped on a little reference to, or a little link to the National Autistic Society's social story page, and I've also embedded some other resources about some social stories that have been written about returning back to school as well, so please check them out. But as I say, it's about what your little one specifically needs to know to do something different, and they are great.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about using video. And I think one of the positive things that's come out of coronavirus or COVID-19 has definitely been exploring and developing new ways of working with young people. And I think that's one of the things we've really tried to do in the team that I work with, is how do we stay connected to our young people when we can't always be with them. And we've just used videos, and we've had such good experience of using videos that I wanted to share with you a little bit of a strategy that I think might be really helpful in supporting our young people back to school. So we know things are going to be different. I'm sorry, I'm experiencing some feedback here for some reason. We know things are going to be different. We know some things are going to be the same. And videos probably a really great way of familiarising ourselves with the reintroducing in a classroom. So one of the things I was thinking about is if you could liaise with your young people's school teachers, what you could actually then start to do is do a video of what a full day in the classroom might look like. So thinking about you know, where the classroom going to be. You could start right from the very beginning, that when you walk up to the school gate, you were going to see lots of arrows on the ground. And that sounds like a really small thing. And I suppose for me, I'm quite used to going to the shops and used to saying, you know, we stand you 2 meters. But I know for my young people that when we went as a key worker to drop them off. We went from having nothing on the ground to suddenly last week having a lot of owls, and it really threw them. So I think, you know, just starting off with that video right at the very beginning, this is what the outside of your school looks like. This is the entrance that you are going to be going through, because it's probably very different to the entrance that you were going through prior to coronavirus or COVID-19. So thinking about actually, how are we going to get into the school? Who's going to greet us at the gate? And how are they going to greet us? Because that could be different. Do we have to do anything when we go in? Do we have to put some hand sanitizer on? Where's the hand sanitizer located? Where do we hang our coats up? Where do we hang our bags up? Where are we sitting? Where am I going to be sitting in the classroom? Actually, this is what I'm going to be able to see from my desk. Because for some young people, that's really important. And that might be about having that liaison with teachers if we are setting classrooms up differently. If you know that your young person struggles with really visually, you know, busy places, then actually you might want to say that they would be better sat in the part of the classroom that was, you know, didn't have as much visually going around. Or if noise is an issue, they may better be sat in a place where it's not so noisy. So starting to have those dialogues with the teachers, and this will need to be a dialogue with teachers, but thinking about what you might want in your video, thinking about, this is where I'll be eating my lunch, this is what I'll be bringing in for lunch. They might have stayed for school dinners. Lots of school dinner services on running, and it's a packed lunch. So thinking about all those different things, introducing any new teaching staff, introducing any teaching staff that are familiar, showing your young person what break time might be. I know lots of schools have been doing sort of very facilitated games like rounders to keep social distancing, but thinking about the type of things that you might do. If it's a sunny day, actually if it's a rainy day, what am I going to do on a rainy day? So just thinking about that. But the aim of the video is really to reintroduce your child to school by providing a video, and it will need some discussion with the school teachers. But these are things that can then go on iPads or whatever tablet your young person has. And it's a resource that can be watched again and again, so that you're not, you know, they've got it there. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned, certainly going through this, is that often we might run through something with our young people, and we might do it once a week with them in person. We've made videos of ourselves doing that. We've downloaded them onto their technology, and they've had them that they can revisit them. They can watch the bits that they want to watch that are important to them, and skip over the bits that they're not so worried about. And you can link it up to your visual strategies. So just thinking about how we might, things that we might have to do to help our young people transition back to something that's very familiar but very different at the same time. So thinking about how, and I think for yourselves as parents as well, that could be really helpful for you to have that experience of what that classroom's going to actually be like and what that might feel like. Because, you know, often our young people go to school, certainly my children, I feel like they've joined the Secret Service. I feel like they started school and there's like an oath that they take that I will never tell mum anything that goes on in that classroom. And I'm sure lots of parents can relate to that. But by having that video, you're prepared as well, so that you've got a really clear idea of what it might look like. So I think it's not for every child, but for some children, it's a really useful way of preparing them for an activity before it actually happens. And I think actually you can use video for lots of things, like, you know, visiting the dentist, going to the doctors, going to the opticians. There's lots of things in life that actually having that video and being able to run through it prior to the thing happening, it can be really helpful.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I forgot to mention on the social story slide, but I think is relevant to both the social stories and the video, is it's about planning when you're going to show these things as well. Because I think it's really, really important that we show them before there's a difficulty, rather than almost reactively showing them when there's something gone wrong, or kind of reactively getting your social story out and saying, look at the different choice that you made. So I think they're always better done before a difficulty occurs, or what I think of as proactively rather than reactively afterwards. I think that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I do. And I think videos are really proactive stuff, because I'm under no illusion that it's going to be tricky to do, if I'm being honest, because you're going to be having to liaise with your school to really be cooperative in pulling this video together. But actually, what a wonderful resource to have, that you can almost, you know, you can access it as much as you need to prior to that. You know, your young person, if there's something that is going to be tricky, they might identify it before they've actually walked through the classroom. How amazing would that be, that our young people are having to look and think, oh, do you know what it is? I've been in that class. I don't really like sitting there in that classroom. Or, you know, even the desks are going to be different, because young people are going to have their own pots with their own pens, their own pencils, their own rulers. That's the big changes for our young people coming ahead. So just those really proactive strategies for me appear to be working really well with the young people that we're working with currently. I just really wanted to pass that on.
Absolutely. And then the last slide that Dionne and I would like to talk through together, so this might go horribly wrong because Dionne and I actually can't see each other, so it's really hard to work out who's speaking when, is we wanted to talk about after school as well, because I think it's all very well going back to school, but planning about what that night looks like afterwards, or what the weekend looks like, is going to be something that we couldn't not talk about, because the biggest thing I can compare it to is if you've ever had a couple of weeks off work and then you're going back to work and you feel really, really anxious, and then you get back to work, and then the night after, the night when you come home, you kind of go, whoo. So we thought it would be useful to talk about an after school plan as well.
Yeah. So as you can see, one of the first things, and I think I've referred to this before, is think about the highly preferred activities that your young person might really enjoy doing and plan them in. So one of the examples I can use is I have a young person who loves to cycle, and they get so much from it. They love being on their bike, they get a lot of sensory input from it, they get lots of proprioception because they're pedaling away. And actually it's quite a common activity for them. So for me, you know, what the things that we've talked about with that young person and the parent is often about, actually that's a really, can that young person cycle to school? Can that young person cycle home from school? Because that's a really preferred activity, and that reduces that difficulty with that transition outside of the house. So thinking about, you know, when a young person comes in, what is it they really, really like doing? Do they like to go on their electronics? Can that be timetabled in some way? And I know electronics are tricky for lots of parents, but if it's a preferred activity, is that something that we need to be thinking about when we're thinking about adjusting expectations?
And it's matching that kind of with that time to chill out. I know that lots of our young people will be coming home on the school bus, or may not be at the moment. They might be coming home via taxi, or you might have to be going to pick them up. It's a lot of unknown, isn't it? But I think sometimes transport home or the journey home isn't something that empties the bucket that we talked about before. So it's that matching that highly preferred activity by saying you've been to school, you've done a great job, or maybe you haven't done a great job, but you've been to school and that's a big ask. Have something great, but let's have some time to chill out as well. Understanding kind of that it might not be great to plan tea immediately as we come home. It might be for some young people that can't wait, or I'm hungry, or it might not be great to plan our family check-in straight away. It might be that a young person needs to go and spend some time by themselves, spend some time, like Dionne says, regulating with their electronics, but having some moments, and that time might be 5 minutes, that time might be 15 minutes, that time might be half an hour, to decompress from the school day, and understanding that the demand of going to school normally and the demand of going to school now is much higher for most children. Not every child, but for most children, their capacity is taken up more by going to school now, because it's a new routine with new aspects within it, that if they only needed 10 minutes to chill out when they got home from school normally, they might need 20 minutes now. And so what we might see is, you might see little ones coming through doors, dumping coats, dumping bags, And it might be that the next thing that you want to have out in your mouth is pick that up, but it's about reeling that back in and thinking, actually, they're going to need some time to chill out. I'm going to give them 20 minutes, or I'm going to give them 10 minutes before I go any further, before I say, come on, come and pick your coat up, or actually letting that one slide for tonight. Time to chill is really important.
And I don't know about you, Steph, but I think that goes for adults as well. I know certainly my working day has changed dramatically, even doing things like a webinar where we'd normally do it in person. We all need that time to look after our well-being, and just that bit time. I know when I come in from work now, I'm a bit like, yeah, I just need to sit down. I've had far more meetings than I normally would have. I would normally use that drive home, that drive in between meetings to empty my bucket. Actually, I don't have that because I put every meeting back to back because I'm sitting in one place.
Yeah. So it's an overused phrase at the moment, but that kind of idea of being kind to yourself is so important.
And so, our young people might need that extra time just to think, I'm going to come in, I'm going to not move my shoes, I'm going to put my bag off. You might want to just, pick a bowl of chocolate, thinking they may need to do something different to what they normally would.
Absolutely, and going back to what Dionne said about adjusting the expectations as well, it can feel like we might be making a rod for our back, kind of allowing some extra chocolate or allowing some electronics time, but talk about it as a special treat, and remember it takes more than once for it to become a routine as well. So it might be one night that you have a special treat in terms of chocolate. It might be the next night you have some special treat in terms of extra iPad time. It might be the next time you get to watch some extra trains on YouTube. But it does take more than once to become a routine. So talk about it as a special treat. Make sure that you're preparing for that, but don't be afraid. It's not going to make a rod for your back straight away.
So the next one I absolutely love, because I'm a real one that does this, but there's not too many check-ins. And I know for a fact that the first day your child goes to school or your young person's at school, they come out and you've got 1,000,001 questions because you want to know what it's like, because you've not been there, your child's experiencing something that you're not quite sure of. So you come out and it's, what was for dinner? Who did you play with? Who did you talk to? Did you have a good day? And by the time, you're not out the school gate, you've asked 1,000,000 questions and you've not had an answer. And I've said about my children joining the Secret Service, it does feel a little bit like that. But I think that's one of the things that I certainly do use, is that one question and 4 comments. So I use my hand. Can you see my hand? And I can actually sometimes feel myself counting it down on my fingers. But I think, it's really important that we don't overload our young people. They've come out of school, that's been very different, and then we place a lot of demand and a lot of questions on them. And just, about taking that time back to think, just asking them one thing.
And I think that can be as equally important for our young people that don't use verbal communication as well, because I think where we ask questions, we're inviting a response that might be very difficult for somebody. So it might be about understanding that actually we're just going to spend some time being quiet together, or we're just going to spend some time maybe winking. I love a wink. Just to kind of to do some non-verbal communication as well, just to ensure that we're not really loading somebody up, especially if verbal communication is not a strength for them.
And I know one of the things that I really like doing on the walk home from school, which I'll be doing today, is just a bit of a wander, and we'll just often say, what can you hear? And actually we'll just do a bit of a mindful walk home and just pick one thing to listen out for.
How gorgeous. Plan for the evening to manage emotions. I know that if I've had a stressful day at work, it's a good idea for me to have a bath. It's a good idea for me to have a bath generally, because hygiene. But I know that it's a really good idea for me to have a long bath. And even though it might not be bath night, kind of planning extra calming activities or planning some of those things that you know work. I know that we talked about time to chill out already, but planning those activities in, kind of going, oh, we're going back to school today. Do you think it would be a good idea to have a bath when you come in? Or do you think it would be a good idea maybe to go for a walk around the garden, or for a, or for a walk in the pond, or maybe we could get our colours out? I realise I've just said so many words there. But planning for an evening to manage those emotions, what normally works to calm, what normally works, what's normally helpful, and building that in proactively so that we don't have to panic to get all the materials together to craft, to colour, getting somebody's favourite bubble bath, because we already know that's on our routine tonight, so we've already got the things prepped for it.
And I think finally, it goes without saying, planning for a good night's sleep, thinking about what works for your young person to help them settle to sleep. I think without a doubt, you know, everything's much more manageable if you can get a good night's sleep. So thinking about what generally works to support your young person to have that routine on an evening where they can go to bed. And I would say this is probably one of the things that many families are concerned about. One of the things that maybe be more difficult throughout this time. I think not just for young people, I think many adults, I think in general, as we're less active, we've been less able to get out of the house. We've got more worries, more concerns. Getting a good night's sleep's just been a bit tougher. So thinking about what it is that would have supported your young person to go to sleep and to have a restful night, and trying to reintroduce some of those strategies that worked for you. If you're really struggling with that, try sitting down with the young person and having a think about it together. I don't know if Steph's got anything to add to that.
I think it can be a really big one at the moment, because I think it can feel like it's easier said than done. And I think that there's a sleep webinar coming up, which I think will be a really great one for us all to catch. I know that yesterday, myself and my 36-year-old husband had to deconstruct our bed and put it back together because he said it had a creak. And I listened, and we did. And last night he had a better night's sleep. Even though I don't think it had a creep. It definitely had a creep, and it was Adam. A creak. I think no, it gets a really hard time. But I think it's a really important one, and again, it's one that even if we don't achieve it, it's not to feel guilty about. So I'm going to show you our next slide is the question slide, but I'm going to just whiz on ahead a little bit and show you the resources just so you know where they are for when you get your PowerPoint emailed out. So here's the question slide. I'll come back to that in a second, but you can see that we've got loads of additional resources that I've just signposted, so they're really worth a little bit of a check out. But I'll come back to the questions. Now, Dionne can't see them, I don't think, so I can see them now. So I've got a question from Paul here. Now let me just expand your question, Paul, because I can see that it's quite a long one. So Paul says, have you got any recommendations for the children who be swapping schools and not getting a transition like they normally do? That's so difficult, isn't it? Going from kind of maybe a year, going from year 6 straight to the new school in year 7. I think that where we can, Paul, I think it would be really, really useful to use those strategies that Dionne was talking about, video, and to ask school whether it can be really difficult, but can we go for walkthroughs? Can we go, can we get some additional information for them? Because I think it's so scary changing school anyway, but changing school at this time, I think that's a really big thing to ask, really.
Yeah, so, for me, I think one of the key things is if we can't get young people to have walkthroughs the school, then I think it really is thinking about the use of videos and having that really detailed plan about this is what it might look like, especially for those young people transferring to secondary school. I think it's going to be key, that using that use of video and really thinking about liaising with the school regarding that.
Absolutely.
One of the strategies I would suggest.
I'm just reading Rachel's comment, which I know is not I know it's not a question, Rachel, but I think it's a really interesting one to share for us all. Just saying that you returned to school during the half-term break to get a taster of what the new arrangements would be like without the pressure of lessons, and I think that's a really great one. And it's going back to talk about that adjusting expectations, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of, it might be that we have to talk to teachers about saying, actually, they're really stressed. They might just need to come in for a couple of days without lessons starting. And we've got a question from Steph now. Always lovely to hear from us, a fellow Steph. And Steph says, how important is a proper ending? Is it worth using the visual strategy to film a goodbye or ending from a class teacher if the child is leaving that school or class?
I think that's a wonderful idea. I think endings for lots of young people are really important, and I really feel for those year 6 children who aren't going to get that year-end assembly, or those year 11, 12 children, 13 who maybe are leaving school. So I think if you can use an alternative strategy to facilitate a goodbye, then I think that's really an important thing. And the thing that springs to my mind is those goodbyes between peers who maybe are moving on to different schools or aren't going to the same schools, to see whether there is some way that you can facilitate that, via parents or uploading a bit of a video to have a bit of a goodbye. For me, endings are really important.
And I suppose I can't really add anything to what Dionne said, Steph, but I think whatever way that you can get it, or whatever way that you can achieve it, even if it's with a card, even if it's with kind of a photo book of all the children, the teachers, don't worry if it can't be kind of all singing, all dancing video, but as long as how you can get it, it's absolutely worth doing. I think for many, many of our children, their lives are full of professionals or teachers or pupils coming in and out of them without proper introductions or proper endings. So I think it's a really great idea to do.
And I think, I don't know if anybody's like me, but I've got a back to school picture from every year, and so maybe it's just about pulling all those photographs together and thinking about it through with your young person, about this is our journey, this is what we've been through, and maybe it's your endings together.
Absolutely, kind of, what do people say? These are the most important days of our lives, school days, and kind of we have to acknowledge that actually this has been a really difficult year for most of our young people, but it's important that we remember them and celebrate what they've achieved. My little brother, who's a little bit younger than me, but also a giant, is a person with autism and a learning disability, and I am so proud of how he's done. He's managed to kind of stay at home. He's learned to bake bread. He's learned to make pizzas. It's almost half killed my mum to get it all done because she's been doing it by herself because my dad's shielding. But I am so proud of him, and kind of one of the things that I hope to do is when I can see him a little bit more is to talk to him about how amazingly I think he's done. Darren has just sent us the most brilliant comment, Dionne, so I must share this with you, but I know that you've got to go in a moment because you've got your school run to do. Darren says that the John Lewis advert has just popped up on Facebook talking about the same strategies and philosophies that we've covered. John Lewis has done it first, Dionne. Same but different videos and worries. So John Lewis are all over that. I'm delighted, Darren. It sounds like everyone's got it covered from all angles.
I'm actually going to go and Google the John Lewis advert.
Absolutely, I might start and send it to people. People will think it's terrible and targeted advertising, though, won't you? But I do love John Lewis. Absolutely.
There are other department stores people can shop at.
There are other department stores available, absolutely. That's all of our questions actually that have come in. So I know that Dionne's got to pop off in the school run, but I'm available for the next 5 or 10 minutes if anyone's got any more questions. I
just really hope this has been useful. We've tried to keep the information as targeted and it's specific. I think both myself and Steph could talk for days, and it's a bit of a challenge for us to A, not be in the same room, and B, keep it down to an hour and not talk over each other.
We've done, it was carefully prepped. The other thing just to mention is that Dionne and I will be doing the behaviour webinar in July. That's next month, isn't it, Dionne? So we'd love to see you then as well, and hopefully you can elaborate on some of the things that we've chatted through, which will include adjusting expectations and the worry bucket and the stress bucket. So but we hope to see you again then as well.
And it's been lovely delivering this today, even though I can't see anybody and I can't see the questions, but I do hope that it's been useful. But I am going to pop off because in these crazy times I have to go and do a school run. Bye.
Bye, Dionne.
Bye.
Right. All I can see many people just kind of talking about, yes, Yvonne, I can definitely show the resource link. So let me just do that. But you will be getting the webinar coming up. You will be getting the PowerPoints emailed out to you, and you will get and all the links will be live on that, so you can see that I've included some YouTube resources, you can see that I've included some accessible information, some links to things like hand washing from the Sensory Integration Network. I've included some links to Books Beyond Words for our young people that maybe have some difficulties with literacy. So Books Beyond Words don't have words in, but they have support and resources for ourselves, included some links to widget, that kind of thing. So please feel free to have a look, but all the links will be live on there. So I haven't got any new questions coming through, so I think that might be us done for today. What I'd say is please do fill in your evaluation that will be launched here as you leave, and please do think about joining us for our behaviour talk. So I'm going to say thank you, and remember, just signpost you to our recording, and Dionne and I can pick up any questions that you want that you send to us afterwards via some FAQs. So I'm just going to say bye for now.